What's happening, everybody? Just in, Carolina has landed a game changer as Maximo Adams is headed to Chapel Hill, a top 20 recruit, a shot creator, and a future staple in Carolina Blue. What does this mean for the roster, for the standard, for the culture? Sherrell McMillan, I'm Joey Powell. This is an emergency edition of the Coast to Coast podcast, now live with a look ahead. Sherrell, I got to do it, man. I got to do it. Got to hit the new commitment alert because North Carolina has received a verbal commitment from Maximo Adams out of Sierra Canyon, 6'7", wing forward, small forward, depending on how you want to frame it. You might remember hearing about Sierra Canyon, very popular school on the West Coast. It's also where LeBron's son Bronny went, if memory serves. But Adams really is a guy that showed up on North Carolina's radar late, and for all intents and purposes, brings a bona fide top 20. Most of the recruiting services have him rated in the high 90s on kind of on that 4/5 star border, kind of coming into his senior scholastic season. Sherrell, tell us what you can about how the commitment materialized for Hubert Davis.
It's very similar, honestly, to a lot of UNC recruitments here lately, portal or high school, in that I would call it like an adaptability and a willingness to pivot when things maybe didn't go the way you expect. And so Adams, don't get me wrong, he's a fine player, but I don't know that a month and a half ago he was the guy necessarily atop their wish list. Or if he was there, he was there with several other people. And so what happens is essentially this past July, he was kind of down to a few schools. I think we've reported it. Joe Tipton reported it that they really thought he was going to commit to Southern Cal because he's from that area. They were being really aggressive with him. This is back in June. And then he decided not to commit on the visit he took there and wanted to kind of open things up and see if some more offers came after Peach Jam. Well, he blew up at Peach Jam, played really, really well, and the offers came. I mean, he got Duke and Texas and Michigan State and Kentucky and Carolina, Kansas, on and on and on. So it worked out well for him. He narrowed his list to I think like a top 11 at some point after the summer, and then maybe a week and a half ago narrowed it down to a top four of Kentucky, Michigan State, Texas, and UNC. And for Carolina, it was pretty much like, he was scheduled to visit on Halloween and he moved up his visit a week. And really, I think they decided that, hey, this is a kid that they have to have considering how the rest of the class went. So um, they treated him like a priority in all the ways that you can treat a player like a priority in these days. They had him on the visit. And I think that's really what sealed the deal. And what I was saying before is that it's kind of a trend in that when Carolina either misses targets or um, you know maybe doesn't get the standing with guys that they think they might, they find someone, they hone in, they make him a top priority, they do whatever it takes to get him, and then they eventually get him to sign. And that's happened with Kyan Evans in the portal and Vessar in the portal. I think that's what happened with Caleb Williams. That's what happened. Caleb Wilson, excuse me, not the quarterback for Chicago, Caleb Wilson. And it also happened with Isaiah Dennis. So it is a trend. I think it shows, like I said, adaptability by UNC.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable context for UNC fans and folks that listen to this show because there are times when North Carolina would miss on a prospect and the entire fan base just gets lower than a rattlesnake's belly button, and they're worried that there's not going to be a next signing, a next signee, excuse me, and the class is just going to be terrible, and UNC is going to fall back into obscurity. And so when North Carolina is able to pivot and close on a kid like this so quickly, what does that say to the rest of the country? But more importantly, what would you say that says to the fan base, about Hubert Davis's ability and the staff's ability, like you said, to pivot and adjust and still bring in a kid that, by all accounts, is a top 20 recruit?
It says that the Carolina brand, the Carolina name still, carry weight, that people still revere it and value it and think that it means a lot. And I don't know if you're a fan of a blue blood school, you don't necessarily want to live this way with every recruiting class, but it kind of feels good if you're the fan of a blue blood school to kind of come in and say, hey, we're X and we're going to get this done. And that's what Carolina has done with several players here over the last 18 months. They've kind of really shown who they are. They've shown a willingness to be aggressive, like I said. So I think it is clear that they are doing better than I think the Carolina program used to do with pivoting and tweaking and all that stuff. Because there were classes where if Carolina didn't get their top target, as you said, there wasn't much left, there. And I think the players in this class, there were several of them who could have been considered top targets at one point, who went by the wayside, and eventually, they land on Adams, and Adams is still like you said, he's I would say consensus top 25, and Rivals has him at number 18. Other publications have him in that similar range. So it's not like they picked up, some scrub off the side of the street. They pivoted to a really good player.
I think folks are probably looking at this or listening to this saying, "Hey, where's Sean?" We gave Sean a pass tonight. Sean recently had a new addition to his family, so we certainly miss our third guy. But understandably, he's not with us this evening. He'll be back with us very, very soon. Everything's fine. He's just celebrating a new birth. So, want to make sure we talk a little bit about what is typically Sean's lane, and that's Maximo Adams' game. First off, and I probably should have opened the show with this. Maximo is a 100% amazing Euro football goon name, and I love it. So I love that North Carolina's got a guy on the roster named Maximo, or coming to the roster named Maximo. But when you look at this player, Sherrell, and the only footage that I've seen of him, in confession, is what he did at Peach Jam, which was quite impressive. I see a guy that can get his shot fairly easily. The fact that he is on the bigger side does seem to have no problem with what is a slower release. Or maybe I should rephrase it. It's not as quick of a release as some guys, but he shoots it really well. His balance is really good. He seems like a guy that when he has a matchup against someone smaller, knows to use his size and his body to kind of back them into a closer proximity for a better shot. But there's a lot to like when you see Adams on film. What's the first or second thing that jumps out at you about his skill set, or what you see when he's working within the flow of an offense?
Well, first off, before I answer that, I want to give props to JC Zimble. He covers NC State for On Three, and we were watching over the summer, and we were watching Maximo's team, and he said, "Just watch out for Maximo Adams." And this is before the blow up. He was like, "People are overthinking it. They're saying, oh, he's too short, or he's not this, he's not that." He's like, "The kid is good." So I wanted to give JC his props there because he called it. He's like, "The blue blood offers are going to come," and not long after they did. But what I like about him, and this is going to sound weird, I like that from a Carolina perspective, he doesn't necessarily have those NBA traits that jump off the page, like a Caleb Wilson or like a AJ DeBansta, that athleticism. Not saying he's not a good athlete, but he's not a plus athlete like them. So you start thinking about what are the things that will, I guess, keep him around Chapel Hill. And the fact that he's a really good shooter, that he's 6'7", that he rebounds, he has all that stuff to make him a really good player, but he doesn't have that top end athleticism that would make him like a one and done, or someone who would be, a lottery pick after 1 year or anything like that. So you project that, if he were to stay at UNC, he would stay at UNC a few years. Like if this was 2001, you would say, "Oh man, that kid, as a junior, he could be an All American. He has that kind of talent." And then, he doesn't have the measurables to go to the NBA. Obviously, the transfer portal changes all that, but I think that's what you like about him, is that he can come in, I think, already in a college program and be a contributor. I think whether or not he'll be a starter is, to be determined. I think a lot on the roster is to be determined, but the shooting ability, the willingness to rebound, the willingness to take advantage of mismatches, all those things, I think will make him a really good player and endear him to Hubert Davis, because, Hubert Davis has talked so many times about versatility, and how he likes guys who can do multiple things. And Maximo is definitely one of those.
Yeah, I also look at, the fact that he does have a 6'7", 200-pound frame, will allow him to do a lot of things for Hubert Davis.
Yeah,
Now,
he's not built
he's
like a kid or anything. He's built like,
right.
a grown person already.
Right. And he's not the quickest. He's not one of these guys that can like blow out a candle and be in bed before it gets dark. Like he's got some room to grow there as far as his quickness goes, but he's definitely serviceable. And you see the skill set that is definitely desirable. Um, if you're looking at him and you're trying to think of something he could work on, maybe beside quickness, is there one specific thing that you feel like probably would really elevate his game between now and when he steps on campus to give him a closer shot at being a surefire starter?
Yeah, I think every high school player, you have to work on your defensive mindset, just your ability to play defense, because a lot of times in high school they either can coast a little bit because they're the most talented offensive player, or there's no one who can really challenge them. So defense is always something you're looking towards. I would say honestly, like a bit of more back to the basket. He's got some of that, but I think if he is going to be a three, which is possible. At 6'7", a lot of times the guys at the three that you're going to be going up against in college are more likely to be 6'4", 6'5", something like that. So working on that so you can take advantage of the mismatch. And then to your point, if he's going to be a four or started the four, he's probably going to be equal to or maybe a little bit smaller than some of the other fours in college. So like, how can you increase your quickness to your point to get by those guys? To be able to get your shot off. So a mixture of things, but he's not like a poor athlete. I don't want to sound like we're poo pooing his athleticism. He's just not that top end next level athlete. But I think there's just a lot to like and a few things to work on, but a lot more to like than there are things to work on.
Yeah, and I should couch that as well. I'm not bagging on the kid's athleticism in any way, shape, or form. I think I'm kind of putting this out there because what I think a lot of folks are going to try to compare anybody that plays the forward position to right now is Caleb Wilson because he's so everywhere for North Carolina, and so when you hear of a kid that may play some of the four and some of the three, that's what people are going to look at. How does he compare against Caleb Wilson? And I get the kind of the natural desire to want to do that, but I do think like you were saying a second ago, I do think he rebounds well. He is fairly strong for his size. I think, like most high school kids, one of the things he could probably work on is lower body strength because when you start getting into the paint on against ACC players, it's really easy to be bumped off of balance. And I think he already has a fairly good balance about him. I think one of his better assets, kind of in his arsenal right now, is um, he's got this little kind of gather fadeaway that he shoots, and I saw it a lot in that Peace Jam video. That is really hard for guys to defend because again, at 6'7", usually he's going up against guys that are his size, and when you can get kind of a high release like that and create separation for yourself with that little fade, it's going to do really well for him. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. We're not bagging on the kid by any means. I mean, he's top, consensus top 20 for a reason, and there's a lot to like. I would also point out to folks that, if you're a subscriber to IC, you have access, or if you're a premium subscriber, you have access to Sean's video that he did and the write up that he did about Maximo's game. I think there's a lot there that will give folks some really good insight about what he can do and what to see about him, what they can see about him from a little bit of time looking at him. Um, Sherrell, how would you rate his footwork? Right, like I think a guy like that, how good his footwork is, can usually depend whether or not he's a good scorer or a really good scorer once he gets inside the perimeter.
Yeah, Sean seemed to like it. And the few times we watched him, I must confess we live only watched him a couple of times because weren't quite sure if UNC would jump in there or if they were serious. But from what I've seen, it looks fine. He is I don't want to say he's like plotting, but he's very careful with his feet, if that makes sense. And he has in the things that I've seen, he does have an ability to get kind of square and get his feet set and get his body together um, fairly quickly. So I think that's a positive, and that's probably one of the reasons that he shot 42% from three on EYBL is because his feet and his arms and his body are in sync. And so his jump shot is repeatable. He's not landing to the left, one side, to the right, next side, 3 feet in front of him, next side. It's
There's no obvious
consistent.
hitch. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's consistent and it's always on balance. So I like that about him. And in general, man, like he's the type of player I think that in this age of college basketball you love because of like you mentioned the versatility, but then he plays hard. And if you watch his high school, Sierra Canyon, if you watch him on
Mhm.
EYBL, like he plays hard and he plays intense. And I think we've learned over the years that playing with intensity and playing hard is a skill that usually takes time to develop, but he already has that going for him. Now he has to learn how to do it at the college level. That's a little bit different than playing hard at the high school level. But I find that most guys who play hard in high school learn how to play hard in college pretty quickly. So he's got that going for him. He's got the shooting ability going for him. He's just the kind of player that is on a winning roster. May not ever really be like the leading scorer, may not be the leading rebounder, but he's always getting you a bucket when you need it. He's always getting you a rebound when you need it. So I think that's how I'm looking at him. Much like Derek Dixon in the 2025 class, we talked about how there's a difference between probably college impact rankings and like
Mhm.
true rankings. Because the true rankings, the goal, as we've said many times, is to kind of
NBA.
mirror and predict the NBA
Yeah.
draft for that class.
Yeah.
Whereas college impact ranking is probably a little different. I think if it was a college impact ranking, he jumps, even higher than he already is. I think, like I said, he's consensus top 25 or 26. So if you talk about, well, who's going to do things in college, who's going to have a better college career, he probably slots up more because of the things that will keep him probably out of the NBA for a couple of years. So I like that about him too. Just, gritty, tough guys who can get baskets. Those are always valuable on any team.
I would assume being the squads that he's played at in high school and also, in EYBL, he's probably got a little bit of Derek Dixon in him in that sense that he's played high level competition for quite some time. I would also, as you were describing what he might contribute in the roster, I'm not saying his game is like Drake Powell, but I could see the way he fits in a stat sheet like Drake Powell. One of those guys that could give you 6 points, 8 rebounds, a few passes for assists, that kind of thing. Which again, you need those type of players. And then one night he might break out for 18 or 20, who knows. But yeah, it's really hard to project that this early in his career. But when you started talking about the way he might contribute to a team, I think that helps a little bit. Um, Anything else you want to add? Am I jumping the gun on the competition with Sierra Canyon? Admit it, I don't watch a lot of West Coast ball, but I know that at that school and then for the EYBL circuit, he's seen some decent competition.
Oh, for sure, yeah, and they play a challenging. They're a national program. Zaire Williams, who was a Carolina target at one point, actually, bit of trivia, he was the first player to ever take 2 official visits to Carolina, because of the rule change. Zaire Williams, who plays for, the Brooklyn Nets now. But yeah, they're essentially a high major program. They played some games in North Carolina. They play all over the country, and then, yeah, in EYBL, Vegas Elite, he got, the best competition in the country. So he's definitely tested, and I think he'll be ready to come into college and compete with, we don't know now who's going to be on the roster, but come in and compete with whoever's there. As we mentioned before, the wing was definitely a priority for UNC coming into this class because, Luka Bogovac, he has 2 years of eligibility. However, you never know. He could decide to go back home. He could decide to go pro. Obviously, he can decide to transfer now. That's in game for everyone. And then Seth Powell, Seth Trimble is graduating, so he will have exhausted his eligibility. Jaron Stevenson, you have to wonder what he's going to do if he stays. Is he the primary four? And then you have a kind of a vacancy at the three, and then Jonathan Powell. So you've got maybe two or three, bodies to cover right now, a few different spots before they enter the portal. So Adams fits the need. I think he'll be able to, vie for playing time, and we'll see what happens.
And I love that you mentioned that motor and kind of the intensity because absolutely you don't see kids lose that from high school to college. It's hard to grow it if you don't have it, but it's definitely almost you never see a kid have it and then it go away. And I think that's one of the things about Caleb Wilson right now that everybody loves is that he's going full bore all the time.
And that's always been there with Caleb. That's it since, like I told the story a whole bunch of times. It's always been there.
Okay.
Dayron Sharp is another one who you remember like, oh man, it's 8 o'clock in
Mm.
the morning and he's going hard. So that's something that is much
It's good
easier to
company.
carry over. Yeah, it's much easier to carry over with you than to gain somehow. So that's a good point.
All right. Any parting shots before we get out of here? Talking about, again, Maximo Adams from SoCal, coming all the way across the country to join Hubert Davis and the Tar Heels in the 2026 class, 6'7", 200 pounds. Sherrell, do you expect he might, do you think he might jump or where he might land by the time the final rankings are released?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think a lot of that depends on
I know it's speculation.
um,
I'm sorry.
yeah, kind of who sees who where and how they play and how the team does and all that. I do think the interesting note is that Carolina's back in California. Growing up, that was one of the places they recruited. There's quite a few players. Um, I don't want to name them. I know who they are, but just in case I'm getting them wrong, I won't say it. Back in the 80s and early 90s. And then they had a stretch there when Roy Williams came back where they had Quentin Thomas and Alex Devison, who ended up transferring, Deion Thompson, the Ware twins, Larry Drew. And then after that, I think Roy Williams kind of had enough. And I'm pretty sure they haven't had anybody on
Only been
scholarship from
once.
California since. Yeah, so that's been what, almost 13 years since they
Yeah.
transferred out. So it's been a while.
Well, it's certainly this is a great development for UNC and for Hubert Davis and for folks that are listening to or watching this podcast. Definitely a player to be excited about. Looking forward to covering Maximo Adams more and seeing what he's able to do now that he's in the fold. I think folks will obviously pay a little bit more attention to what's going on with his senior season. But once again, Maximo Adams from Sierra Canyon out in California is committing to Hubert Davis. And Sherrell, I'm assuming he will sign during the early signing period. Is the expectation?
That is the expectation. And that's why the announcement came. The signing period ends on Wednesday.
All right. You heard it here first. We are your favorite podcast. And though we are down a little bit without Sean Moran, but Sean will be back. Again, just very huge propers and flowers and congratulations to him for the new addition to their family. Sherrell, appreciate you making time for this emergency edition of the show. Again, if there's a story to be told about UNC, specifically around basketball recruiting and basketball in general, you're going to find it here. We're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt. The same way you're going to find the great news and the great information here, you're going to find a great selection and great gear at Johnny T-Shirt. Hit them up, johnnytshirt.com, or right there on East Franklin Street. Sherrell, we'll talk to you very soon, man. All right, I'm Joey Powell. This has been a special edition Coast to Coast podcast for InsideCarolina.com. Y'all make it a great one.